Ready?
I'd say wait. Let's give it another 15 seconds.
Okay. Good afternoon. My name is Greg Davis. I'm with CBS ArcSafe. Today we're going to discuss the RRS-1, our universal remote racking system. For those of you who've been using it, you may want a little bit of a refresher, or for those that are new and have not looked at the system before. The RRS-1 is a universal rotary remote racking system capable of racking over 240 different types of breakers that we have evaluated around the world. The system is made to be changeable in terms of quickly adapting from one type of tool to the next. It simply uses a half-inch tool adapter like you might find in a toolbox. It's got a little locking lug on it, so if we put the tool on there, the tool's not going to fall off. The tools, in terms of if I had a toolbox in front of me right now, I could have 50 different tools in it and rack most of those 200 different types of breakers that we've evaluated. The system has two protections in it for protecting the switch gear. We've got a mechanical clutch up front, and then we have our current control module in the back. The mechanical clutch is our backup, and we work to set that so that we're not going to let it try and impart more torque into the system when we're trying to determine the numbers on a new type of breaker that we may have a customer trying to operate. To start with, we'll pull this forward, and we're going to just show how easy it is to adjust the clutch. I use a 3/8 inch torque wrench, and today I'm actually going to work to do this from the far side. Normally I do it from this side just so that I can have the open area without the arm in front of it. And I've got my torque wrench set to 15 foot-pounds, which for the vast majority of low voltage breakers is plenty of force to be able to use to rack a breaker. So I've loosened it up. You can see right now that the head is spinning. And now if I just start pushing down on both of these together, boom, all of a sudden my torque wrench clicks. So I've limited now the force that can come out of the front, even if I have the motor spinning, to only 15 foot-pounds. We do have options with the system for a light and also a camera. We're not going to look at those today. The system is made to have the head tilt down if need be. If we're dealing with something like a Siemens GMI, we can go get a breaker that's down there at 1 inch off the ground for the racking mechanism. Or if we need to, and we've got to go get a high breaker, we've got our high lift, which will allow us to raise this up. And then we can elevate the motor all the way up to 83 to 90 inches if needed to get a high breaker, something like a Siemens RL in a 4-high configuration, or a Siemens Alice LA, or say an old ITE K-line. It's got that racking mechanism way up above your head. That's what this is making. And then we can lower this back down, lock it, and make it much easier to transport around a plant versus having something elevated way up there. The next thing we're going to look at is our motor brake that's on the back of the unit. I'm going to turn the unit on now. And the motor brake, if we turn it off, you're going to see that I turn it off for two reasons. One is if I'm aligning this with the head, because I have to be able to rotate the motor to make it line up with where the racking mechanism was on the breaker. And if I try to rack a breaker with a motor like this, the motor's got inertia when it goes to stop. It's called coast down. Well, we don't want that coast down energy to go into the breaker, and we'll show you how this works. So right now I have the motor brake off, and I'll start the racking process here. And we'll see that when the motor shuts off, it spins a little bit more. We don't want that energy going into the racking mechanism. So now if we turn our motor brake on, and we stop the unit, you'll see that the motor stops right away. Okay. There are a couple of exceptions to this for when we don't use our motor brake. If we're dealing with an ABB breaker like or IT or BBC in the HK, VHK, HKV family, or an ADVAC for medium voltage, which have an interlock where you want the interlock to float after the racking operation is done, we don't use our motor brake. If we're dealing with a low voltage breaker like a Master Pack NT or an NW with an interlock, we won't use the motor brake because again, we want it to float and not bind on the interlock when the racking operation is done. The system comes with a standard 35-foot pendant, so I can rack a breaker with this up to basically 35 feet or about 10 meters away, okay? You've got an option to have a jog feature here. So if we're having to index it, this is what our jog functionality does. If we have large arc flash hazard boundaries, instead of standing in the room and we have to get out, we can go with our radio remote. I have been in a cement plant not far from here with a 294-foot arc flash hazard boundary on the medium voltage lineup in one of the two primary feeds for the facility. We did the demonstration sitting about 100 meters away outside under a tree in the parking lot. The radio remote is good for out to 100 meters with a clean radio path. So if you've got a metal building, you're going to have to leave a door open for a clean radio path to the radio remote so that you have a good radio signal going back and forth. So with this, I can rack and do it like that, but I can do it up to 100 meters away with our radio remote system. The breaker that we're going to work with today for our demonstration purposes is a Westinghouse Cutler Hammer DS breaker. It's a small one. And just to talk about our current control setup, so if you'll bring the camera over here, we'll look at that real quick. For most of your breakers, we look at them as mechanical apparatuses in terms of we look at how much force does it take to move it, to get it on, to get it off. And so we're able to quickly change our install and remove settings because the RRS-1 is not a PLC-based system. It's very easy to change these settings. So if you've got a breaker like this, or say like a General Electric power vac, if it's a 1200 or 2000 amp breaker, we can set the RRS-1 up to do, if I was dealing with the GE power vacs, I know that if I set it at 12.5 for install and 10.5 for remove, I can do 99% of the GE power vacs that are out there that are 1200 and 2000 amp breakers. If we're dealing with a 3000 amp breaker, we're going to need to move the number up. But these are mechanical systems in terms of a given mass, a given bus size, and you're going to have a certain amount of force that should be normal that you're going to see doing this. So these tend to be very repeatable. There are statistical outliers. We go over those with customers. We talk about them because you can actually use the RRS-1 to help you with cubicle diagnostics, and we go through that in training. The peak force that you should see is actually when you have the breaker go onto the bus and the finger cluster spread. If you see a higher force than that when you're removing or installing a breaker, there's most likely something wrong with the breaker in the cubicle. The RRS-1 doesn't fix a problem, but it will help you diagnose that you do have a problem and you need to address it, okay? So that's one of the things to make sure you understand, and we've had customers give us feedback that they've told us, yes, when we found a breaker where it took more to take one out than to go in, you're right, there was a problem in the cubicle, we were able to get it fixed, okay? Because up until this time, you're just depending upon one person's arm compared to another to give you feedback as far as whether or not you think you've got a problem. With the RRS-1, we can actually read out what the forces are that are being used to rack the breaker. And that has been a great benefit for many customers to help them identify and actually start tracking maintenance on cubicles. Now, when it comes to setting the RRS-1 up, the way that I find it easiest to do is if I'm going to use this, I'm going to try and basically bore sight like a gun, is what I use as a comparison, and line it up, and I'll bring it up here, and you're going to see that I'm going to use the power slide that we have on this one, and I'm going to put the nipple that's on the end here about in the middle of where the racking mechanism is going to be. And I'll just slowly push the machine up here. to get it right into that spot. And when I get it there, then I'll stop the elevation of the motor. I'll back it up. We have two types of tools just to talk about. If we have, and then the thing to understand is there's two types of racking mechanisms. You have moving breakers with moving racking mechanisms and stationary breakers with stationary racking mechanisms. The Westinghouse Cutler Hammer DS breaker is a moving racking mechanism with a moving breaker. So we have a set of foot latches on the back of the unit for stationary breakers. On moving breakers, we don't put our foot latches down. We may use our tether kit or a tetherless tool. This is a high-strength rare earth magnet. This magnet can generate up to 150 kilograms or about 350 pounds of force, depending on how heavy the metal is. So it's not going to come off of a metal surface. And all we're looking for is about 10 pounds of force for the unit to go back and forth with. On this tool, we're going to use our tetherless tool here on the DS breaker. We note, first of all, that the breaker is closed. So before we put our tool on, we want to open the breaker. We're going to use our RSA 12B. And we're going to install this on the breaker. And the funny thing I'll tell you is, human nature is that a lot of people want to stand here and watch. Well, the whole idea is to be away. So I step back, we work to be outside the arc flash hazard boundary, trip the breaker, and then we can come up, we can verify that the breaker's open. We'll remove our RSA, and now we're going to work to install our tooling on the breaker for the remote racking operation. Here's our tool. We'll push our trip button. We're going to open the door, install our tool. And there we go. Now we'll take and we'll move the RRS-1 up. Okay, I've got to raise the motor just here. Got that. Now I'll put our motor brake back on because we don't want to impart the additional energy in there. And I'm going to just take the numbers back down where I had it before moving real quick. Okay, now we're going to use our radio remote, and we'll actually be able to remove and install, and we'll be able to watch the numbers here for the force readout as we do this. Okay, let's try that again. There we go. Got a slight amount of residual torque, I think. And we can see the 5 and 4, and we'll reach the end of the racking operation in a second. We'll hit our all stop, at which point we would then turn off our motor brake to remove any slight amount of residual torque in the system, and we would disconnect and move it back. To install the breaker, we'll turn our brake back on. We're going to clear the all stop that we have at the end of the operation. And then we're going to hit our install button to install the breaker. And you can see the 4.5, 4.9. You'll hear the motor volume change when it hits the bus, which is right there at 6.1. And hit the all clear. So this is how it's made to be set up and operated. We'll turn our motor brake off now. And at this point, we can remove the RS-1 from the breaker. We'll take and then at this point, we would take our tool off. If you're in a plant, you'd put your lockout tag out. If you would actually, if we had it still in the remove position, and then do the maintenance procedures that you're planning to do. As I said, if you've got questions, the maintenance on the system is actually made to be fairly easy. There's a full diagnostic in the manual. The batteries are something we would encourage you to check once a year. The recommended replacement by the battery manufacturers is every 3 years. So these are simply 12-volt AGM batteries. They're the sealed 12-volt 8 or 9 amp hour are the ones that we use. You do have to have the batteries in the system to be able to use it. The radio remote, again, is a great option for people who have high arc flash hazard boundaries. I would, even though this has been around for many years, I would make sure that people look at the arc flash hazard stickers and respect them, because I have been in many places, both domestically and internationally, where people just want to stand in front of the breakers and watch how things work as a natural human tendency. And you have to walk people back and walk off the distance of that arc flash hazard boundary to keep your people safe. This is what it's about. Distance is safety. It's our company saying. If you've got any questions, we're ready to answer. And the other thing is, you can send any questions you've got also to info@cbsarcsafe.com. When you call us, we've got field reps that work various parts of the country. I myself use WhatsApp, and I get communication from customers around the world that I work with looking at breakers and pictures. So the RRS-1 is actually just one of over 700 products that we have for remote racking and remote switching. Thank you.
And so after this, I can see that a couple questions have been raised. And we'll answer a few questions for a few minutes while we still have people here. So if you do have questions, please type them into the sidebar. John J. Ewing asks, is there a manual as to know what settings are to be used per breaker? We do have general set points that we know to be effective over many years of operations, and we will absolutely send those to you. So for GE, AK, AKR, PowelVac, GE Power Break, Square D, Master Pact, NW, NT, those are all fairly common breakers that we have specific set points and that are readily available for us to send to you. So absolutely, we can send you those at any time.
We hope to get it shared later today for those who want to be able to share it with other people.
Yeah, thank you, Rick.
These are made in the USA for those who are asking questions. So we've got our local facility here in Denton, Texas, where all of this is done. The units are made in a UL approved operation, and the RRS-1 itself is, as far as I know, still the only UL approved remote racking system in the world.
Right. And John, to answer your question, we would be happy to get in touch with you and to work out a formal quote for you as well. So if you could contact us at info@cbsarcsafe.com, we would love to build up a quote directly for your needs for one of these units or for any one of our other units that we have.
One of the things to explain is the RRS-1, while it's an extremely capable system and will do over 240 different types of breakers we looked at, let's say you've got a small NEMA enclosure where you can't really fit something like this inside there. Our RRS-3 lineup, we would encourage you to go look at, because those are able to quickly go into a small enclosed substation or up a flight of stairs with one person carrying something in their hands versus moving this, which, and to just let you know, the RRS-1 is the lightest universal remote racking system on the market. Okay. It weighs under 200 pounds. The next one is anywhere from 250 to 350 pounds for anything else that may be out there.
And can the wireless module be adapted easily?
The wireless module is paired with this system, okay? And what I mean by that is this. I could have 5, 10, 15, 20 RRS-1s working in the same substation with radio remotes, and they're not going to interfere with each other because the radio remote is paired. I'm going to turn the unit around here for a second so everybody can see this. So there's a radio base here, and you've got this right here. So I've actually had to do this with customers who have two RRS-1s before, just to prove that they can't cross communicate in one substation. So we racked two breakers at one time with two different operators, and they're like, going, okay, it really does just communicate with the base that it's paired with. Okay, so that's one of the things to do. That's how it's going to work. The weight is about 185 pounds. And just real quick, if you've got questions, you want to give us a call, you can call either 940-382-4411 or 877 472-3389. The number behind me.
So different speeds of the motor. So we actually have two separate motors.
We actually have two separate motors. We have a standard speed and then a low speed with the jog capability. And the thing to understand about that is this, is the first year we were doing this, we actually went up to our sister company, Circuit Breaker Sales in Gainesville, Texas, and I was the human guinea pig, and I would sit there and I would have to rack breakers manually with a guy timing me on a stopwatch. And then we worked to pair the motors to closer to what a human being does. Because you can rack a breaker faster, but the answer is you're probably going to tear up racking mechanisms doing that because they aren't built to go at high speeds. Okay, so the speeds that we pick for these machines are based upon the breakers and how fast they are actually meant to be racked as a mechanism.
Anybody else have any more questions? We'll give it another minute or so. You may talk about video systems.
The unit will actually shut off when it sees the rise in torque above what you have set at the desired limit. As soon as it sees it trying to generate more torque than what you want it to do, it shuts off. So the RS1, the thing to understand is this. So if we're looking at low voltage breakers and you look at what you have for a tool, say for a K-line breaker, you use what's affectionately referred to as a speed handle to rack this. That speed handle only has like about a 4-inch offset. And so these things are very repeatable mechanical devices to us. And so we work to limit the amount of torque that we're going to let the unit generate, and we work to monitor the torque. And we've actually helped customers identify bad breakers and bad cubicles because of that. So the stop points are set based upon what we have identified as the best setting for that family of breakers.
Thank you, Rick.
Thank you, Rick.
Appreciate that.
And I'll give an example. I'll give two different examples of things that I've seen way back even in my first year of doing this. The first one was our chief scientist and owner Finley told me, Greg, these breakers should rack within 1 to 2 foot-pounds for a given size. And what's actually tended to happen is we see them rack within about a 1/2 foot-pound for a given amp frame size. I worked my first year with a 50-year-old lineup of ITE HV breakers at a power plant in Louisiana. And here were the numbers: 15.4 amps, 15.7, 15.4, 15.7, 15.7, 15.7, 15.7, 25.8. And up until that day, the power plant manager, John, would have said, Bubba, get down on your hands and knees, rack the breakers. And he gets down to the last one, he says, I think that was harder than the rest, John. And the answer would have been, Bubba, you just racked 9 breakers. Your arm getting tired. But you've got an ability with the remote on the radio to read out the force that's actually being used. And while I'm not a cubicle technician, I can tell you that, you know, you got a 50-year-old lineup of switchgear. You could have a settling foundation. You can have a bent racking mechanism, a dry racking mechanism. You can have grease that's turned into glue, turned into cement on your finger clusters, so they're not spreading. I've seen people put 2 or 3 different types of grease literally on a pair of finger clusters. And my dad taught me all the way back in high school chemistry that if you do this, you're going to generate a chemical reaction and you're going to have rocks back there. And that's what we had happen. Our sister company helped them come and clean that off. And we watched the force on some ABB HK1000s go from 70 foot-pounds required to rack a breaker down to 27, just by cleaning up a misapplication of lubricant on the rosettes, on the finger clusters on the back.
So if anybody has any more questions, please feel free to ask in the sidebar. But if not, you can always call us at 940-382-4411 or email info@cbsarcsafe.com. We'll sit here for another 15 or 20 seconds, but if not, we do appreciate you coming to the live RRS-1 refresher broadcast on YouTube Live. Hypothetical situation.
Okay,
Here we go.
so the first thing is it's a good question. The battery, the CCM has a indication on it for low battery. If you get down to low battery, you're down to 1 operation with it unplugged and just on the battery. The system is meant to be operated, whether you can operate it plugged in or standalone on the batteries. If we're operating at battery and we're dealing with draw out breakers and you've got a new or well-charged set of batteries in there, you should be able to do 50 operations on a single battery charge. You can leave the unit plugged in 6 months to a year because it's got a smart logic charger on it. So it'll go standard charge or go high charge, standard charge, trickle charge, and just be there, keeping everything charged and ready to be used. So, and yes, we do have solutions for breakers with interlocks. We'd like to know which type you've got. So we've dealt a lot with the ABB HKs. We've got the NTs.
AdVac.
We've got the AdVac. We've got some Toshiba breakers we've dealt with.
AMH.
We've got the AMH breakers for GE. There's several out there that we've evaluated and done.
Talking to RS2 stuff as well.
Yeah, and we've done also stuff, just to let you know, we've done things for in the RS2. The RS2 is for breakers that are what operators affectionately call using a dead man or suicide ratchet to get them in and get them out. And there's plenty of those that we've done. So the RS1, we've evaluated over 240. For the RS2, we've actually evaluated over 100, or no, the RS1 is 240, the RS1's over 140 that we looked at applications around the world for customers.
Okay. Well, once again, thank you everyone for coming to join us. I hope everyone is staying safe, operating safely. And if any critical infrastructure needs come about, do not hesitate to give us a call to see what we can do for you today. Any company within Group CBS is more than willing to help out wherever they can for those essential businesses. So thank you very much. Have a great day.